sponsored in part by Pediatric Associates of Dallas. Pediatric Associates of Dallas has been providing excellence in pediatric medicine since 1971. PAD has locations in Dallas and Plano and is now open 7 days a week because taking care of kids is what we do.
The following content is not intended as a substitute for professional legal advice, medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your attorney, advocate, physician, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding any medical or educational concerns.
Hi, and welcome to the Empower Dyslexia podcast. I'm Rachel Chambers.
And I'm Stephen Yearout.
And we're here to help you be better partners in education. On this podcast, we're going to discuss dyslexia and related disorders, research, policy, a special education policy at a state and federal level, interventions, and then we're also going to be talking to experts in the field. So hope you enjoy the show today. So I can't believe I'm going to say this, y'all, but please like and subscribe. Like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. What do they say? What do the kids say?
I hear it all the time from my kids. Smash the subscribe or like or whatever it is.
Smash the button. I don't know. Anyways.
Make sure that you like us and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you find this information beneficial, please write us a review on both.
Yes. Okay, so joining us in the studio today
have a huge treat.
Yes, Nancy Disterlic. She has her master's in teaching, and she is a licensed dyslexia therapist. Yep. And she's a CULT, which is a certified academic language therapist.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Yep. It's hard for me to get all of the acronyms, but so anyway, she's going to be talking to us today about not dyslexia. Well, yes, dyslexia, but executive functioning or executive function. So I'm excited because I don't really know that much about it, and I'm sure she's going to have a wealth of information. So good morning, Nancy.
Good morning.
And welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Great.
So since we have you on the show and you have such a wealth of knowledge and you've done dyslexia therapy, you've taught dyslexia therapy for 6 years now?
Yes.
6 years. So I'm sure that you have heard some pretty ridiculous things said about dyslexic children.
I've had a lot of ridiculous things said about dyslexic kids.
Okay. Well,
So we have a segment,
yes.
Rachel and I on this show, we try to make light of a lot of things because this is such a serious topic, right?
I agree.
We want to make sure that we can have a little bit of fun with it anytime we can, right?
Yep.
So we have come up with a segment called Most Ridiculous, and we would like for you to join in with us
I'd
since
love
you're
that.
here.
I would love it.
Okay. Okay, so which one of us wants to be the first to draw?
I think we allow our guests to
Okay,
start.
Nancy, draw a little thing out of
No
the
pressure
cup.
to read. Okay.
No pressure.
You can cure it if you would just read more to your child.
So what do you think about that?
It's very interesting because a lot of people will say that they completed the program, they're done.
Oh, they
They're
graduated.
finished.
They graduated the program? Yeah.
And that's kind of what we'll talk about even today because it doesn't go away. You strengthen them and that ability to read, but you're never cured of that reading.
Can you say that last part again?
You're never cured.
So there is no cure.
There's no cure. Sally Shaywitz will even tell you that we can make improvements, but they may not always be able to shorten that gap.
Yeah.
You're not cured.
We're not looking for a cure. We're just looking for
Right.
intervention, and we're looking
That's right.
for you to teach us the proper way.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, so Stephen, why don't you go?
All right, let's see here. That was basically the same one we just read. You need eye therapy or color overlays. It's a vision problem.
Right.
It's a vision problem.
Well, I'm glad that's in there because actually the handbook addresses that. They actually put things that don't work. Cover overlays will help with your stamina. Dyslexic kids often don't like the white page with the black print, but it's not helping with the decoding.
Right.
It's just helping with their stamina, but it's not helping with
So
their
it's
decoding.
not like the, what was the anti-decoder ring? You put the color overlay and magically they can read, right?
Right.
No?
No.
Well, and my brother, he had the blue glasses and the blue
Yeah.
overlays back in the 80s, and and he'd wiggle and wobble as he was reading, and I really don't know if it helped or not. He did finally learn to read though,
They've shown it does.
but he had also an intervention.
Right.
So.
It's a strategy that helps with stamina, but it is not helping with that decoding.
Okay,
So yeah, but it's a myth out there.
interesting. I thought that was interesting.
Ridiculous.
Okay, this is a long one. Okay. So 504 accommodations do not apply to AP courses because LD students don't belong in classes for smart kids.
Wow.
Ooh, that's a loaded one.
Accommodations don't belong in AP classes
like advanced
because it's
placement
for
classes.
smart kids. So basically what you're saying is
That's harsh.
children with dyslexia are stupid.
Right.
That's what that said.
Right. And you'll see that they'll have the accommodations and they're saying we're trying to level that playing field. But if they're already enrolled in those classes and they already have those accommodations, they are available to them. So they can't do that.
That's
But you will hear that.
it's infuriating hearing that.
But I do like to advise my parents, and this is again with executive function. I'm glad these are your questions. I tell my kids that if I had put you in just one AP class and that's all you had, my students have the ability to do that. But the reading and the rigor of these AP classes, when these dyslexic kids are in more than one, sometimes they do get overwhelmed because of the executive function. So you want to make sure they're getting those accommodations and helping them.
Absolutely. So, all right, let's move on.
Yeah.
Just because we've got
Thank
a
you
lot.
for playing that little game with
That
us.
was
We have a
great. Thank
lot
you.
of information to cover here about executive function. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, where you've worked, some of your certifications, what those mean? Because I've heard some comments back that we use a lot of acronyms that people may not
That's true.
understand what those acronyms mean.
That's
so
I know I didn't at the very beginning.
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
like,
It
"That's
was
what?"
when I first started this journey doing advocating for my sons. It was like drinking from a fire hose,
Right.
right? And I wish I had somebody sitting there going, "Oh, slow down,
Right.
pump the brakes. Here's what all this means. Here's what these
Absolutely.
acronyms mean."
Absolutely.
Right? So, take it away.
So I have not been officially identified with dyslexia, but when my son was struggling, I started learning more about dyslexia and was like, I read a book in Barnes and Nobles and said, wow, this is really who I am. And so that's when I started my journey of learning about it. I was an elementary teacher, and I kept seeing characteristics of kids going, that kid's going to be dyslexic. Like, I need to refer them. And there were more and more kids coming through my classroom. Then the dyslexia therapist on the campus said, you should become a dyslexia therapist. And I said, I can't. Like, this is my deficit. And the opposite was true. When I got into the dyslexia therapy, I felt like I was able to help the kids more because I have trouble spelling restaurant. I have trouble reading without my finger. So when I had that same struggle working through with these kids, it was different. So when I became a therapist, they put me at the high school level. So my background in elementary was with identifying kids and helping them in the classroom with strategies. But then I became the therapist at the high school level and seeing that our secondary kids, once they've been through that program, are still needing support and still needing those strategies. They're not cured after they've seen the decoding skills improve. They still have other deficits. So that's how I got into dyslexia.
That's really great because you can kind of understand at their level what they're going through since you've been there and experienced similar things.
And the other thing we
personally.
talk about is the emotional, and there's more and more coming out about emotional, that you have to address the emotion of most things to get them to walk through. Yeah, go ahead.
So I want to make sure that our viewers understand when you say emotional, you're not talking about the child is emotionally disturbed, but
Thank
the
you.
emotional side of the disability, right?
Correct.
The constant
Feeling down
barrage
about yourself.
in their mind, because they are beating themselves up as much as everybody else that's telling them that they're not good enough, that they're not smart enough, that they can't do this work, right? They're doing that to themselves. They don't
Correct.
need anybody else's help doing
That's
those
right.
things, right? So when we talk about the emotional side, we are addressing those type of things and bringing their self-worth and their self-confidence back up to a level so that they can get past all of that stuff and continue to grow. Right?
Thank you for clarifying that. You're absolutely right. There's an anxiety that comes with being in an environment that's dependent upon reading skills, judgments on reading skill, the way that you're grouped inside of that classroom. And well-intentioned, beautiful teachers don't realize some of the impact of things they say, me included. I was an elementary teacher, and like I've got the bulletin board that needs to get up, and I've got to get everything graded, and you've been pulled for all these classes. I've got to get you to hurry. My own emotion and what I'm sending that child is not that it's okay. I'm saying, come on, hurry, and it's not enough. And so well-intentioned teachers, I like to let them have that space of emotion to let those kids be where they need to be and to validate their emotional side as we address the academic. So yes, thank you for clarifying what I meant by that.
That's important. That is so important. Okay, so let's get to the meat of it. What is executive function?
So you have a conductor in the beginning of your brain, the frontal lobe, and it's telling you how to sort your information. And so
So right here.
the frontal lobe. And so information coming in, it's going to tell you how to sort it, how to predict it, and how to pattern it. And so at the age of 5, according to David Sousa in his book, How the Brain Learns, at the age of 5, if that hasn't developed, then that means that sorting system is having to work harder. And so ADD, ADHD, these kids that are having a difficulty holding 2 or 3 things in their mind at one time, having to think something through, or sensory overload coming in so they can't discern that information or pattern it, that's where they're struggling.
So you're saying you're seeing these deficits as early as 5 or even earlier?
Yeah, you can start seeing it. Perfect example is my own kids. When my 5-year-old was the oldest and was having trouble getting his backpack and putting on his shoes and getting in the car and getting his spelling, blah, blah, blah. And then when my 3-year-old and my 1-year-old became 5, they had their backpack ready. They had their shoes on. They knew to be in the car. And that's when now he was in 3rd grade. It's like there's a difference between my younger kids and my older son who's struggling. And so, yeah, if you look back in hindsight, I can see the differences as a toddler that he was struggling. His brain is designed different.
Yeah.
Come to the car with one shoe on and half the socks aren't matching, and
Exactly.
you're on the
Or
way
just
to
forgot the backpack.
yeah, you're on the way to
Exactly.
school. Oh, I forgot that I have this paper that's on my desk, and
It's that ability to hold that information and how to work with it. So I can go through.
And so you said that develops at 5.
David Seuss is saying at the age of 5, that's when you're starting to see that their brain is automatically patterning for them. So if they see something, they can start, it categorizes. So like the example I'll give is like a cat. For you may love cats. So your brain is setting that pattern up for you. You're allergic to cats, or you got bit by one, so you're afraid. That brain is starting to pattern those things.
Okay. And so let me ask you this. At what age, since that's about 5, at what age does maybe the brain start to become better at these
Developing
things?
those skills.
Yes.
I don't have
does
that
he-
information
okay.
specifically, like when it's developing, but I have strategies on how to develop it. So in the classroom, a perfect example for a student with dyslexia, I would ask them to process out loud what they're thinking. And what I found in my classroom is they may only think 2 steps out. I got the assignment and I can't do it. And so I'm like, that's fair. Thank you for being honest to me with, how you're thinking. Let's add a step. So you start training their brain, and you can also, there's a book called, I just went blank on it, Daily 5, and it's a classroom management system for elementary. And you can build reading stamina for kids. And you can teach an ADD, ADHD kid to sit still and to start with 1 minute, 3 minutes.
And just progress.
And you get up to 20 minutes, and they learn how to hold that body. Same thing with processing at the secondary level. I can start saying, let's think 3 steps out. Let's look at 4 steps. what were you? So that's how you can build that stamina.
So when I was little, I started martial arts, Taekwondo when I was really little, like most kids, right? And I could not remember the steps.
The steps.
Right?
Correct.
Okay, I knew all of the movements one by one, but I couldn't string them together. And now as an adult, I started about, I don't know, 6, 8 years ago, I started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And you constantly have to think 6 or 8 moves ahead of where you're at. So that's interesting that you said that. I mean, that was one of the things that helped me a lot is the martial arts, because I had to know, okay, this move does this, and I've got to be able to plan for what your strategies are, what you're going to do. So I have to put all those things in order.
And you were utilizing muscle memory as well. And a lot of the programs will talk about that muscle memory. So with executive function, I have them go through that frontal lobe with pictures, color, or emotion. So they have something to stick that information to. So you'll see mnemonics, you'll have teachers have these strategies, but a dyslexic student specifically needs to have something to attach to, because our brains want to do it by language. But a dyslexic student needs to do it through their frontal lobe, thinking color, pictures, or emotion. So if the muscle memory when you're learning jiu-jitsu, if you're visual and tactile and feeling it, you were able to probably process that better than if your teacher was giving out oral instructions.
Right. You could tell me, okay, you got to read chapter 4, 5, and 6, and you got to. I heard you got to read and shut down.
And shut down. And that's what, well, if I can go to the slides, there's one slide that I'd like to talk about with characteristics of dyslexia, if you'd like to go over that.
Yeah, that would be great.
So Ziggy, if you could put that slide up.
So this is actually, I'm very proud to give credit to one of my students. We highly talk about advocating for dyslexia. Let me do my little thing about the eyeglasses.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's an emotional, that anxiety. So the first thing I do with my students is we talk about what dyslexia really is for them, and I want them to weigh it correctly. And I said, I have poor vision, so I have to wear glasses. I don't have to. I choose to wear glasses so that I'm able to cope. And so I said, if you'll look at dyslexia as it's something that may hinder some reading ability, but as long as you are accommodating that, then you can be successful. And so just weigh it correctly. You don't want to overweight and be a victim. You don't want to underweight and not use your accommodations and advocate for yourself. Right. So again, so the strategies for dyslexia, I talk about their emotion, where dyslexia is, and then we walk through this chart. And not every dyslexic student has these things. It's beneficial for a parent to look and say, oh yeah, my kid only has a few deficits, or these are their areas. This is why I need these accommodations. But it's empowering for my dyslexia students to say, oh, these are my areas this affects me. And look at all the areas it could affect me. So it's
there's
really
7.
powerful.
Is that what we're saying? There's 7 little circles outside the dyslexia circle. And each student's different.
I love it when I sit my kids down when they first get identified in their group, and we highlight our areas, and then they show their chart, and they see that we're all different. And so mine says, I have difficulty telling time. So they're like, Mrs. D, you can't tell time? I'm like, well, I can. It's just difficult for me, so I don't choose to wear a watch.
Oh,
So that's powerful for them to first put it in its right place, know exactly what we're discussing, and that's that metacognition empowering them, and that's beginning that executive functioning, saying, you've got this.
So they're putting, I don't want to say a label, but they're identifying where their problem is, and with identification comes empowerment, I think.
Absolutely.
Because then they can better help themselves and know what they're good and what they're not so good at.
Well, I like the thing I like about that
That's
slide.
a good slide.
Like you were saying, it's especially for a dyslexic, it's really nice to sit there and go, okay, well, yeah, that's one of my areas that I need to work on. Seeing it written down allows me to understand that this is a weakness area that I need to improve on.
Right.
And I can always refer back to it versus this big umbrella that I'm dyslexic. That's so ominous sitting over your
Correct.
head
Correct.
that you're
It's just a
dyslexic,
big-
right?
Right. What does that even mean?
Yeah.
Right.
What is,
So, thank you for doing that with your kids, because they need that. They need to understand that just because you have this label, which we need the label to understand what it is,
and how to
and
help.
then we need to come down a little bit further and go, okay, what are your weaknesses and how can we give you the tools in your toolbox, right? We always have to have a toolbox. What are the tools in your toolbox to help you bring up that deficit?
And what is each kid individually? Because each of them has it in a different way, because their own cognitive ability, their exposure in their home, the emotional effects, if they had something happen at school that was more traumatic for them. And I'm not exaggerating that. I'm saying if a teacher has called you out in the hallway for reading, then you become more hindered in the classroom. So that's what I mean by the trauma there. So having them break it down, understand exactly what it is they need. Another example I give, because medical, I love using medical analogies, is you have two, this may make sense. There's two types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2, but there's two types of diabetics. You have compliant and non-compliant.
Yes, you do.
And so how do I have a dyslexia student become compliant with me? And it's because I first address the emotional part of it. We talk specifically how it affects them, and then what can we do to make a strategy to help you improve?
So
You just break it down to where they go, okay, I can do that.
So you're building that trust with
Building
them,
that trust, absolutely.
because that trust has
Fundamental.
already been destroyed by
Correct.
somebody, intentionally or unintentionally, right? There's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of good teachers out there that understand it, and there's a lot that
great
don't.
job.
And even the ones that sometimes understand it tend to, because we're all human, they
Right.
tend to say stuff emotionally
Right,
because they're frustrated, and that scars that student.
absolutely.
And if you don't take care of that emotional aspect, like you were saying,
Absolutely.
you're not ever going to be able to reach them.
And that's what was powerful going from elementary up to secondary, because secondary students could verbalize that. The elementary students are still living it and developing that maturity. But the high school students could look back and reflect.
Yes.
And so they could say, Mrs. D, I didn't realize what this did to me. And I'm like, well, I have the same stories. I mean, Mr. Yearout and I had both talked about being in third grade and being in the line for the library. And I couldn't believe my friend would ever choose a book without pictures. Like, I felt bad for her. And she looked at my book and couldn't believe I wasn't reading chapter books. And luckily we were best friends and it was okay in that moment. But I remember feeling sorry for her, all those words. And like, who would not want picture? Who would want that many words in a book?
Yeah.
So I was telling Nancy the other night at the event that in high school, I checked out and carried around Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Wanted to read it desperately.
Yeah.
The size of the book was so
It's huge.
intimidating.
Overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I think I may have forced myself to read the first 3 pages. But I guarantee if you go back to the library and look, my name is in that checkout. I couldn't even tell you how many times,
Yeah.
because I desperately wanted to read it.
Yeah. And that's the other great thing that I've talked to my students about, is that need, that desire. And David Sousa talks about this, and so does Montessori. You're innate wanting to learn.
Oh, yes.
These students want it so bad. And what happens is, that's why my big plug right now is audiobooks, is so you can feed that intelligence. Their decoding level is not at their reading level, and so their understanding level. And so we want to feed that too. So I got these secondary kids hooked on audiobooks and coming in
Good.
and talking about authors like, oh, and I just read.
Leaves of
Yeah,
in the
and-
ground.
yeah.
Walt Whitman.
And you
That's
change
what I'm
that
trying to say.
emotion. You change the emotion associated with it, because now they can stand up and say, yeah, I have
I've read
dyslexia,
that.
and I know how to
I
handle
always
it.
wanted to be in a book club in high school. And I
Yeah,
couldn't do it.
I don't think that I ever fully read a book until audiobook. And now I've finished. I mean, my phone is almost completely full
Yeah.
because I have so many audiobooks, and I love to sit and listen to these audiobooks. And I love the information that's coming in, right?
Yeah.
Because if I hear
Absolutely.
it, I'm getting it, right? I can be
Absolutely.
doing 900 other things, and I'm hearing this information, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's great. And it's just like a sponge, right?
Yeah.
And I keep going back to, man, I wish I had
I
this when I
know.
was in school.
Yeah.
I could have done so much better, right?
Right.
And I'm so glad that we have those audiobooks now for
Absolutely.
these kids to take that away and take
Yeah.
that boulder or the rock in the road, remove that rock, the big rock.
And I do want to add to that, because we have, just like when we build that reading stamina for elementary kids, you have to learn how to have a listening stamina, because remember, a lot of these kids have ADD or ADHD, and so their mind will wander, or they'll daydream during the audiobook. They're like, yeah, I can't do audiobooks. So you want to make sure you don't just say, here's an audiobook. You want them to listen just for a little bit check for understanding, and build up, say, just listen for 7 minutes, depending on their age, listen for 10. But you have to build the skill
Right.
The
to do
listening skill.
audiobooks.
Yeah, that
So,
tool in
so
the
I always,
toolbox.
because a lot of parents are like, yeah, my kid doesn't like it. It's like handing them a bicycle, but not training them on it. They won't know how to use it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's, can you tell us the signs and symptoms or red flags of executive functioning?
Kind of like we talked about before, it's the person who probably can't hold that information for a long period of time. They can't handle more than 2 or 3 instructions. So if you see a student having difficulty with memory or following instruction directions, that's your main 2 keys.
So
Okay.
let's talk
memory
about,
and
let's
holding
take it from school age. Let's take it back down to parents before they get to, kindergarten.
Okay.
What are some of the things that these parents need to be looking for to see that, hey, we may need to start looking at some of these tools like you're talking about, or doing some other type of exercises to help strengthen those weaknesses?
Okay, I don't have the information like from David Sousa specifically to that, so I'm going to talk more of experience and what I could do. I can tell you what I did in the classroom. So before preschool, before you're in elementary, it's just watching the difference between the student who go in your room, clean it up, pick up this, and then come back out. The parent will be frustrated if you're
Those are
seeing
4
your
tasks, right? Go
If
in
you're
your
s-
room, clean it up, get your shoes,
and then
come
brush
back
your
out,
teeth,
or
whatever it is.
And that's
And if you find yourself changing your patterns to fit your child, then maybe there is something going on there. Because most children are going to start adapting, building that memory, building the ability to say, oh, now I can do 4 tasks. Now I can do this many tasks. But I don't want to have a parent out there going, oh, my child can't do that and they're 3.
Right.
Each child's individual. These aren't things that are a diagnosis, or it's just saying, be mindful if you're watching your child on the playground with other kids. Are you seeing a difference between what they're able to do than another child? But they develop at different ages. I don't want to ever caution
right.
a parent, but you start picking up on it. Elementary school is when you start seeing it more significantly, when the teacher has asked the entire class to get an item, do something with the item, and then do something else, and that student's still struggling to do that.
Can I say this real quick? Which kind of cracks me up. But it's so purposeful. So my son is in Scouts, and for the last 3 years, and I've attended a lot of campouts and Scout camp, and with the boys. And so when we go down and line up for flag, the scout or the head director, camp director says, okay, boys, 3 things. First thing. And everybody goes, first thing. And make sure you pick up your merit badge. Second thing. They yell back. Whatever. Make sure you line up for mess hall. Third thing. And they all go, third thing. Have fun or whatever it is.
Right.
But it's like, okay, I have 3 things. We're breaking it down. See if you can remember. So I think, and that's interesting. And I think the Scouts have been doing that for a long time.
And so they'll be able to do that because it was participation, high interest, a routine that he's doing all the time. So there's reasons why he could maybe do that. But if the Scout master had just said, do these 3 things,
right.
We go
they
through
might
that.
not have been able to. They'd be like, now I
In
know I'm
one
supposed to
ear, out
have
the
fun.
Right.
So, and then I don't know, do you want to talk?
Well, we go through that with our kids when we're giving chores out. We have to give 1 chore.
Yeah.
Go to your room. Well, 2. Go to your room, pick up your clothes. Come back to me for
Further instruction.
Because if we give them, you need to
5
clean your room, you need to sort your laundry, you need to put your laundry in the specific bags for laundry, and then I need you to do the dishes.
What?
They hear, go to your room,
Right.
and by the time they walk out of the room where I'm standing, they've already forgotten
What they were
9/10
supposed
of
to
what
do.
I've asked them.
And you want to start building independence. So you want to get to where you have a piece of paper and they know the only rule is check the piece of paper. And so they need to know what's next and next and next. You want to start building that independence so they're more successful. And I also talk about that with accommodations. Secondary administration and teachers' goal is that our kids are able to function in this world. And so they're not weaning accommodations but they want to at least say, how much do you really need, or how much can you do on your own? We want you ready. So when you're at the secondary level, make sure you're working with the administration. They're not trying to take away rights. They're wanting to say, we want your child to know what they need to do, how to do it, and get that information on their own. And until they're ready, they should be in place. But you also want to have that relationship. So my favorite example is I had a student who's really struggled with attention. And so we made a to-do list, a checklist. We color-coded her binder. We had sticky tabs. We made a note for her homework, and we put it in her phone. So the next day she came to school, and I said, okay, how did you do? She's like, okay, here's the thing. I forgot to check my phone. So we put everything in place for her to be successful, but she still had difficulty. And you know what? I met her where she was at. I was like, all right, so now we know this. We need your alarm to do this. We know that the alarm goes off before you get home. You forgot. It has. So you just keep working with them. You give them that encouragement. You look them straight in the face. You're like, we're right where you need to be.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with where you're at. And then you say, what would you like for yourself to be that goal? You put that choice back to them and say, where do you want mom to be reminding you? Do you want Mrs. D to remind you? Or do you want some independence?
Yeah.
And then they start growing into what they want for themselves. And then you allow that be their journey. But and it's a process. You have to have patience with it. My other fun example is my own son. Why didn't you think that through? He's like, I did. It would be fun and I won't die.
Right.
I'm like, okay, there's other steps in there. Like you needed to but it was beautiful when he said that. And I was like, my son is someone who has to learn by experiencing it. And so I said, one day maybe you'll learn by listening to advice of people you respect. But until you're there, we're going to walk that with you.
So
Right.
us as teachers and parents and administrators really need to slow down and talk to the child.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And we need to understand what they're saying. We need to hear what they're saying.
Right.
Just like you said, my son said, it sounds like it's going to be good fun, or I'm going to have a lot of fun doing it, and I'm not going to die. So you know that the two things that was important to him is fun and not dying.
Right.
Right. So now you got to go, okay, well, how do I build what I'm asking them to do?
Correct.
Around those two things.
That's right.
That are important to them, right?
And here's something key for you as well. I'd have a lot of parents call me like, D, my kid will do anything you say. Well, developmentally in that secondary, they're gaining their own identity outside of parent.
Right.
So that person who needs to listen now, that trusted relationship with someone with a learning disability, it's really hard to find that in the classroom sometimes because those teachers are ready for you to be independent and you're still struggling with things that you know you should know. So having a teacher at the secondary level that trusts them, that's monitoring them and gets them is very vital at the high school level because mom and dad are in a new role. We're wanting to show you I can do it. And here you're still asking me if I process that through and we want to show you we're ready.
Right.
So there's a really vulnerable place and a beautiful place for these secondary kids to find that trust at school.
I remember
That's
having
good.
some teachers like that. Miss Lowens, my biology teacher, was that way. I could come in her room and
Yeah.
talk to her about anything.
just got
It didn't
chills.
matter. And
Yeah.
she was amazing. And you know
Yeah.
what? I performed for her.
That's right.
I wanted to do the best for her, no matter how much heartache or struggle or anything that there was. I was going to make sure I could fail everything else, but I
Right.
wasn't failing Miss Lowen's class.
And you're touching on human nature because it doesn't stop. Like when I talk to educators, it doesn't change with our teachers. They want that principal that believes in them. They work harder. So we're still wanting that validation as people to be saying, hey, do you approve of me? Do you think I'm doing a great job?
Yes.
And so our students are no different. They're wanting that
same
if I have that
validation.
relationship and that trust, I'm able to do well.
So I challenge teachers and administrators at the high school level.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Even at the middle school level, because it's starting there.
Yeah, that's true.
So I challenge you: seek out and find these kids, and bring them in, mentor them. Just let them talk. Let them be themselves in a place that is very comforting, and see the change that you will affect in that child's life.
Absolutely.
So that's my challenge to each and every one of you that are listening. Please take it and run with it.
Absolutely.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to talk about as far as
Did you want to
executive
share that other
function?
slide?
Yes.
yes,
Oh, sorry.
yes.
We got so, I mean, it was
I don't know. Yeah.
so,
So tell us about this slide.
So this slide is very personal to me because I was in school, and when I saw this slide, it was the first time I had science to back why my classrooms were successful. And so I can say it's not about me, but I can tell you what science says about a successful room. So this is from David Seuss's book, How the Brain Processes. I highly recommend this as a book study for any school. And he has his different books depending on what you teach. So it's ELL, differentiation, math. So it's a great series. So sorry,
So-
thanks
So
for letting me
you're saying
tangent, do the little
this-
plug.
This slide is how the student sees the classroom.
So
This,
explain
this
this.
slide is how you process. And dyslexia is a processing disorder. So the way information comes in is the environment. It's all coming in at once. And your body automatically, your brain is saying, am I in fight or flight?
So we're over here at the self-concept, little happy face.
No, you're at the
environment.
Environment.
Sorry,
Okay, so
thank
we're on
you.
the left side.
You're on the left side, and all of sensory is coming in, and your body's determining whether or not you're in fight or flight, which we're generally not. So as soon as your brain says, okay, it goes to immediate memory. And the brain is saying, I like this information. I think I might use it. This is really great. This is where at 5, that executive function is patterning for you.
Okay.
At this point, if you do not have that ability to automatically pattern, the information has to go to working memory. So for those of us, myself who has ADHD, I have to, if there's a noise in the room, if my tag on my shirt's irritating me, if you actually have a characteristic that I'm totally focused in on, I'm like, you always go like that, whatever it is, if I hyper focus on, I'm like, Nancy, stop looking at it, but I can't. So it's because everything stimulation, my brain's not patterning it. I have to think about it and say, Nancy, focus.
Focus on.
Right. Okay, so
Okay.
thank you. If you'll pull the slide up. Thank you so much. So immediate memory is coming in and you're deciding whether you like it or not. When it goes to working memory, that's when you're thinking and utilizing information. And I give the example, let's just say you have 10 buckets in working memory. If you have a learning disability, then you have less buckets. If you have a trauma or you have something that you are not wanting to file, you haven't dealt with something, it's in working memory. And then you need to be engaged and working with school or your job.
So
You got
you're-
stuff coming in you got to do. You got
I understand.
information.
Okay.
So that's where working memory is all engaged.
So you have your 10 buckets, right? You
Yeah.
were saying, and then you have a learning difference or disability. So that takes away, what'd you say, 5, 6?
Well, I
7
said took away
whatever.
buckets. Yeah, it takes away buckets.
Right. So
Yeah.
I'm just trying to paint a picture for our viewers. So it takes away, let's say, 5 buckets, and then you have the trauma, like you were talking about, which takes away 2 more buckets, right? And then you have something else. You're down to maybe 2 buckets of working memory, and the environment and everything else goes on. So you're already.
You're already struggling to hold that information. And now remember, if you have ADD or ADHD, everything's coming in. You didn't already have
Like
it patterned,
everything.
so everything's coming in. So when
Light
these kids are saying,
sounds.
I'm overwhelmed, they're overwhelmed. They
are.
don't have space. And so the example I give them, like their phone, I'm like, why is Mrs. D sliding things away? They're like, because my phone will work faster. I said, the processing rate of your phone increases when you've given it more storage.
Great analogy.
Your working memory is no different. I need to get some storage in there so I can work with you. And so you can table thoughts. And I teach them with executive functioning and processing that you are in control of what those thoughts are. So you can table things and come back. You can open up your mind to what we're saying. So even when I do presentations with adults, I'm like, some of you are making your grocery list right now. I mean, you're looking at me, but you had to come
not
here for your
hearing me.
CEU credit. You're not even here because you care. You are deciding at every moment what you're going to use and not use. That's why they also, ADHD kids can hyperfocus. They'll say, no, my kid can play his video game and not even hear me call him to dinner. They have hyperfocused that information they're looking at and paying attention to. So, okay, we'll go up to the model. So then working memory, you've decided, so let's just say today's program, you're like, oh, my child has dyslexia. This is really great. You went from immediate to working. You're like, oh, these are tools I'm probably going to use. Podcast ends, and you're like, I'm going to implement that with my son. You've put it into long-term memory.
Okay.
So that's how your memory is working. There's 2 chemicals. There's multiple chemicals, but 2 types. You have your happy chemicals, your endorphins, And what endorphins do is they open up long-term memory, because remember, the brain is there to protect itself and to pattern and have automaticity. And so it's saying, this is such good stuff. So when your son's at Scouts and he's like, I love my pack leader and I love coming here and I love everything about it, long-term memory wants more of it. So it's literally chemically saying, I want to hold this information. So then you have your negative chemicals, and these are cortisol and they're stress hormones. And to protect you,
They're like, no.
it blocks long-term memory.
Yes. Okay.
The reality of
sense.
that is your kids in elementary school taking that spelling test. Thursday night, they know them. They know every single one of them. And they're doing it with mom and dad at that kitchen table with their snack in their pajamas, and they've got it. And tomorrow they're going to make mom and dad so proud. But emotionally, they get to school and that pattern of, I'm going to not do good and I can't do this. This is terrible. I hate spelling. I hate school. I hate me. The emotion is causing negative chemicals, which is closing long-term memory, and they can't access the information that is there.
Oh my gosh.
So emotion is where we get to that core.
I'm so glad you just said that and explained that, because that just kind of rang true to me.
Yeah, I just got
now.
chills.
Well, and go back to the model. So at the very beginning, fight or flight, for a student with a learning disability, specifically dyslexia, which is a reading disability, school's now a place of fight or flight for them.
Yes.
Because the teacher could call on you and say, read next.
Yes.
The teacher could call on you and say, where's your work? And so they now have a stress hormone happening in that daily environment, unless they had a teacher that got them or understood them. So the reason why this changed my life is because in my classroom, they were giving me, I enjoy getting the kids who don't fit. So I'd always say I kind of had Misfit Island. And it didn't matter if it was emotional or academic or socioeconomic or bilingual, anything that caused school to be a harder place for them, a stress for them, I wanted them in my room. And my scores were coming out the same as the teachers who weren't having kids that struggled. And it didn't make sense to me. We followed the same TEKS. We followed the same curriculum. We were a great team. So the difference is in my classroom, we were Camp D. And we had matching shirts. I greeted every single one of them in the morning. We counted my mistakes. Everyone gets an eraser and they name it. It's a class pet. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, did you know in my room we get pets? And so erasing, I was like, if you weren't erasing, you weren't learning. We changed the chemical about what we see mistakes. We changed how we saw everyone in the room. There was no, you're great at that, you're working on that. It was everyone has a goal and everyone has a strategy in the room.
That's
You go to any entrepreneur.
Everyone has a goal and a strategy in the room. And so this kid over here is working on how to do a PowerPoint, and this student over here is learning how to spell cat. Awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
So the chemicals in my classroom were positive. Endorphins. More was staying in long-term memory. That's why my kids had progress. So it was the emotion.
Right. So
And that
build that
safety,
trust, right?
building that safety and
so for our
trust.
teachers, build that trust. You want to get your test scores
Absolutely.
up. You want to get these kids to
100%. I just got chills.
participating.
You're right.
Build your trust.
That's right.
Stop with what you're doing right now. Understand who the child is.
And
Build that trust with them, and then they'll perform for you.
But here's the other thing is I think we've also gotten to a balance of where a lot of teachers interpret that as they have to go out of their way and kids aren't held accountable. The opposite. You're holding the kids to the accountability of their potential, and you're like, you can do it. We aren't the teacher saying, this is my classroom, this is what I do. You're standing behind kids saying, I'm going to watch you, you're going to grow, and I'm going to support you. And so there's more on the kids.
They're doing it.
Well,
The
they
kids
take it
are
on.
doing
They take on
it.
that
The kids are doing it.
responsibility.
They take on the responsibility. So it is not enabling kids, and it's not accommodating them to a point where they're enabled.
empowering them.
It's empowering the kids.
Yeah.
And one of the most powerful things you can do as well is you praise kids only with facts. You don't say you're awesome. I really like that you chose to write your
Yes.
letters closer together.
Yes.
I really like that you spelled your words correctly inside of your paper. You praise what they need.
That's
And that
awesome.
builds that trust and that relationship. They're like, because when you overpraise incorrectly, they know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they
Don't say, oh, Johnny, you're such a great reader.
Yeah, sure.
I know I'm not.
not a
Right.
But you can't say, I noticed that you read further than you did yesterday.
Yeah.
That's
That's a
true.
good one.
I know that I saw that you got a book on the level this time.
Yeah.
That's true.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
That's good. That's
Beautiful.
good.
It's beautiful.
It's been really nice to have you on the show. Tell us about what you're doing at Region 10 Education Service Center, because they're all around the state. How many do we have in the
So
state of Texas?
The state of Texas divided into 20 regions.
20 regions.
And
Okay.
I'm very proud to say I'm part of the legacy of Region 10 because Tynesy Miller, who stood up as a parent and said, look, my son deserves to have the education he needs. So she helped create Region 10 Having Dyslexia Consultant
okay.
back in the 80s. So we're now with that legacy involving parents. We're going to have a parent newsletter this year. We're looking to have a mentor program in Region 10. So that way.
So a parent dyslexia newsletter? Is that what you're?
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
And that comes out next Friday. So parents will be
good.
getting home strategies on executive function and things that we can do at home because dyslexia does not end at school.
No, it
right?
doesn't.
Like,
parents need help too.
Parents need that support and what they can do. The child's so worn out from that long day. What can we do? But the mentor program, we had a mentor program where high school kids went to junior highs into elementaries. And the emotional and trust is when an elementary kid hears a high school kid say, yeah, I failed STAR. And they're like, what? Yeah, I'm on the football team, or I'm in band, I'm in show choir.
But this is all the stuff I can do.
This is all the stuff
This is how far I've gotten.
And I thought we were, look, I have chills. I thought we were empowering the younger kids to get where they need to be. But my high school kids also got to see how far they've come. And they're like, Mrs. D, I had no idea how sad I was in junior high.
That's right.
I just was hiding behind feeling stupid.
So to add to that, that's one of the things that I get out of doing what I do now
Absolutely.
is being able to stand up and say, yeah, I was failed not only by myself, but my education. I take responsibility for my part, right?
Absolutely.
But being able to walk in and talk to children and go, hey, dude, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. You're
Yeah.
not broken.
Yeah.
And that's what I think happened with my therapy is because when we get to the word restaurant, we'd all look around the room like, who's got a phone? I don't know how to spell it,
yeah.
somebody. And so here I'm the adult who is successful with a master's degree, went to college, because they're
Love
thinking,
it.
Miss D, I can't do it. And I'm like, I really did think, okay, we're both from Oklahoma. I was waiting for OU to kick me out. I knew they were going to find out I didn't deserve to be there. But
Such the anxiety. all
oh,
through
I
school.
knew.
Me too.
And so I got a 4.0 my freshman year because I was so scared of failing.
I got it my last semester, but that's okay.
I have a semester that wasn't so good, but
My first semester. Anyways, I had fun. Okay, well, that's great. So good
Yeah.
things
So we-
coming from Region 10.
yeah.
Be
So
on
we're-
the lookout.
Absolutely.
North Texas. Okay. So we have some upcoming events I'm going to tell you about. So Soaring to New Heights. This is from Stand Up LD. They're going to, it's a student workshop. And this event is a day of celebration for kids with learning differences. They're going to speak out. And it's going to be led by Eric McGarty, who he and his wife are founders of Stand Up LD and are very sweet, helpful people. It's going to be on Saturday, February 23rd, from 3 to 6 p.m. at the Kavanaugh Flight Museum in Addison, Texas. So please try to go if you
So
can.
the participants there, the intended participants is 6 through 12 year old. Kids that are struggling with dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, auditorial processing, ADHD, those type of things. And they're going to help try to give them some of those tools to put in their toolbox,
Excellent.
right?
Yes,
And
they're a
if
good
you-
group of people.
You want some more information about it, you can go to our website, www.empowerdyslexia.info, and we have it on our events list there.
Yes, we try to do all regional events or statewide, and we'll try to get some nationwide stuff up
So
there.
if you
too.
have an event that you want us to talk about, please send us an email.
Okay, so that's all the time we have for today. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Empower Dyslexia. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and leave comments and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Smash the like
Write
button.
us a review and smash that like button. Okay, and also check out our website, as Steven said, and 3dudes.com. This is a t-shirt company that was inspired by their 3 amazing smart boys. You'll be sure to find comfortable, custom-designed t-shirts for the dyslexic person in your life. Please check out their website at 3dudesdesign.com.
Boy, those kids are good looking.
They are.
I wonder where they get all that from.
I don't know.
Maybe their mom?
Maybe.
Maybe. Well, again, we hope that you enjoyed this podcast. Nancy is just phenomenal speaker. If you get a chance to go see her, please do. Her presentations are amazing.
Next time we'll do a 3-hour presentation.
Right.
No,
You know, we always leave this show saying, if you think that there is a possibility of having some learning differences or learning disabilities, please don't wait. Go get your child evaluated. You'll be happy that you did. Your child will be happy that you did this, and we'll be able to get them, or you'll be able to get them, the proper support that they need so they can be successful, right?
And remember, to start that process, we have a letter template on our website if you'd like to go check that out and get that evaluation rolling at your school. So check out our website.
We'll see you next week.
See ya. Thanks for joining.
Today's podcast has been sponsored in part by Pediatric Associates of Dallas. Our dedicated team is committed to delivering quality and compassionate care to generations of children in North Texas. PAD has locations in Dallas and in Plano and is open 7 days a week.